Hey guys, I'm Colin Wright, and I am going to answer some questions. Here's one that I'm asked quite frequently. Are you ever afraid when moving to a new, unfamiliar city or country? I mean, the real answer is maybe a little, kind of. It's not really fear so much as maybe trepidation and a certain type of like tingly excitement. When I first started traveling, it might have been a little bit different. It was more of a fear-based anticipation, perhaps, but never outright scared. I haven't been put in that position yet. I'm not saying that that could never be the case. It could be that I go to a place where there's like some real constant, tangible, concrete fears that I have to worry about, some real problems. But thus far, the places that I've been, the only real fears that I've had has been the fear of the unfamiliar, and that type of fear tends to draw me in rather than repulse me. And so when I go to a new place, I know that I won't know very much, and I know that I'll have a lot to learn, and I know that I will be the most ignorant person in the room at all times. But that kind of encourages me. It incentivizes me to go out and fill in those gaps in my knowledge and go out and meet people and go out and learn how society operates and go out and learn why things are the way that they are in historical context, in economic context, in cultural context. And so for me, rather than it being a fear-based thing, it's more of an excitement and like a longing almost too. I cannot wait to get to these new places, and the more unfamiliar, the better. So fear doesn't really come into it. I can understand why people, particularly people who haven't traveled very much, might feel initially afraid or might feel something that they read and register as fear. But more likely than fear, it's probably discomfort. And it's the discomfort of being pulled out of our familiar space, being pulled out of our comfort zone. And that's okay. I mean, that's the value of travel. And one of the things, among many, that you learn when you travel a lot is to get very comfortable being uncomfortable. And this is why you grow so much when you travel as well, because you're constantly exposed to new things and new ideas, and everything is unfamiliar, and that means you learn very quickly, but you're also like exhausted, mentally, psychologically exhausted all the time, because you are being pushed up against all of this unfamiliar stuff. And so when you look at this, when you are feeling those feels when you're thinking about traveling, I would encourage you to look a little deeper. And rather than just immediately saying, oh my God, I'm afraid of this thing, first figure out if there's any tangible reality behind the idea that you should be afraid. If you're walking into a war zone, maybe you'll have a little bit more incentive to be afraid, like real reasons to be afraid. Most places, though, are just kind of a different version of what you've got back home. When I initially started traveling, I left LA to go to Argentina, and everybody was like, oh my God, South America, it's going to be so terrifying. Statistically, I was more likely to be victimized in parts of LA than I was in Argentina. But the perception, because I was more familiar with living in the United States, was that I should be more afraid in South America, in Argentina. And so consider that. Really, really take a look at these feelings that you feel and say, one, should I actually be afraid? Do I have any reason? And then what can I do to be prepared if there is some legitimate danger there, above and beyond what I'm accustomed to anyway? And then two, look at that fear and say, is this fear or is it trepidation? Is this me getting all a Twitter with anticipation? Like, is there some other deeper, better word that I could use for this so that I don't look at travel and say, oh my God, I'm afraid, and instead I can say, I am anticipatory, or some other beneficial word rather than a negative word with a negative connotation. Here's another one that I get asked pretty frequently. How do you cope with failure? As somebody who has failed a lot at a lot of different things, I've gotten pretty good at coping with it. That's not to say that it gets easier. That's not to say that I seek out failure. It has become kind of an old friend. It's something that I see quite a bit, and it's something that I've come to associate with getting closer to success. Because if you fail a couple of times, chances are you've learned some incredibly valuable lessons, and that means that you're just a little bit closer each time to getting where you want to be. But failure sucks every single time, and it really, really doesn't get any better, to be perfectly honest. I mean, you get these other associations and positive ways of looking at it, but it does suck every time, and it is a blow to your ego, and all you can do is remind yourself that you've gotten back up before, and you've made it work before, and you've gotten to where you want to be eventually before, and then claw your way back up into a standing position and start walking again. That's all you can do. I had my first big failure as an adult. I had many failures before this, but this was the first one that really registered as like a gut punch and then a kick in the nuts right after it. That's how much it hurt. When I started my first business in college, and I was 19, and everything was going swimmingly. Like, I started this magazine, and things were kicking butt, and I was getting a lot of press, being this young kid starting this business in the Midwest, and it going so well. And we threw this great big intro party that was like a combination fashion show and concert, and it was a great big thing. It was a big success. But then a couple issues in, the thing collapsed, and it had nothing to do with the product. The product was good. It had everything to do with the fact that I was somebody who knew how to make a good magazine, but had no idea how to run a business. And I had to learn that in the hardest way possible by seeing how little I actually knew about running a business. And by looking back at the successes that we had had with the events and stuff, and realizing that it was the people that were helping me out, the people I'd surrounded myself with, was the reason that things were going so well. And so acknowledging that and getting very bad public press and being exposed as a fraud who doesn't know what he's doing, and having all of the editors in the area who run the other magazines and newspapers going, ha ha ha, I told you so, know your place, kid. That sucked. Everything about it sucked. And I went into my room and I never wanted to leave again. It's not any different when you fail later either. Every failure that I've had since then has been about the same. The difference is, having experienced it that bad once, then I can look back at that event and say, well, that sucked so bad. And yet I moved forward, and things were good after that. Things just got better. And that informed the way that I acted in the future, so that my future businesses actually succeeded in the long term, as opposed to just being a flash in the pan. And so being able to look at it in context and say, this was a bad thing that led to a bunch of good stuff, or this is a bad thing that I overcame, rather than just saying, this is a bad thing. That's what allows you to get past it, I think. And so for me, failure is not something that I pursue. It's not something that I romanticize. It's just a reality. It's a reality if you are doing anything worthwhile and anything that is challenging to you and anything that is growth-oriented. If you're trying to get anywhere and do anything worthwhile, chances are you will fail. If you don't, like, I have no idea how you manage to do that. I guess enjoy it, but it's very unlikely. Everybody fails at some point, whether in a big way or a small way, privately or publicly, and all you can do is take it and pull yourself back up into a standing position and start walking again. If you enjoyed this video, a thumbs up, like, or a share would be awesome. You can also subscribe to my channel. If you have a question you'd like me to answer in a future episode, you can leave it in the comments below. You can find me elsewhere on Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat and Tumblr and every other place on the internet at Colin is my name. And you can find out more about me and my work at colin.io.